the Eagles have Josh Sweat,
Mm-hmm.
Bryce Huff, Nolan Smith, Brandon Graham, maybe Zach Bond in the mix after the Andrew Van Ginkel comparisons that were hoisted upon him. In making this deal and getting rid of Haason Reddick, who do you think that Howie Roseman is betting on the most on this Eagles defense?
Yeah, good question. Because when you asked me that out there, I was thinking about it, and I would say the obvious answer is Bryce Huff. And the obvious answer is Bryce Huff because they paid him $17 million a year. He's the highest paid edge rusher on the team, right? So literally the investment's the highest, other than draft resources, which they spent on Nolan Smith. The age profile, what they project is kind of the curve there. I think, and this is in an ideal world, he's what Haason Reddick was, an up and coming pass rusher when they signed him, who's better in his contract with the Philly with the Eagles than he was before that. So I think the literal thing they're counting on is Bryce Huff, who had 10 sacks last year as a 40% player, being a 15-sack guy at 60%, right? And then we can talk about Nolan Smith, first-round pick last year, who was not nearly as productive, and we'll get to that conversation. But the player that I just want to highlight here is Josh Sweat. And the reason I say that is because I think there's almost Josh Sweat had a bad end to the season, and it's almost viewed almost like James Bradbury now, right? Like, can you count on this guy? I view the context much differently. Josh Sweat, who took a pay cut to stay, right? We talked about that, is trying to maximize his value going into the free agent market next year. From the beginning of the 2022 season to the bye week of 2023, and you could say those are arbitrary numbers, but that's a 25-game sample size there. Would have been 26. He missed a game. 25-game sample size there. Josh Sweat was top 10 in the league in sacks. He was tied with Brian Burns for 10th in the league. He was number 8 in the league in quarterback hits during that time. Josh Sweat was on a trajectory. Like, his numbers were improving every year. He was outplaying the contract that they signed him on. We've spoken to people in that locker room. Lane Johnson's been very public about this. Chris Long's been very public about this, that Josh Sweat has tools that are rare at that position. And he went silent production-wise during the back half of the schedule. If they get the Josh Sweat that they had for that year and a half, then you have a number 1 or 1A, like maybe a 1B, but you have a Pro Bowl edge rusher. All right? Josh Sweat wasn't that in November and December last year. If he can be what he was for that year and a half before then I think the Eagles' pass rush will be what they need it to be.
I think the most important context that you said there is that he took a pay cut, right? Like, if the Eagles expected him, if Josh Sweat expected himself to be one of the top 10 pass rushers in the league, he would not have taken a pay cut.
Good point. I just think that Josh Sweat,
that does not happen very often.
No, I think Josh Sweat realizes that he needs to maximize his value this year to get the deal that he wants next year.
Yeah,
and I think that's the calculation.
So the reason I ask you this question is because as I was thinking about it, the way that I view it is that the person that Howie Roseman is really betting on here in accepting, because I don't think that you can expect Josh Sweat to be a top 10 edge rusher next year. I don't think that's what he's being paid. I don't think that's like the deal he took. And even Bryce Huff is definitely a projection. Nolan Smith, what you can get from him, I view as sort of gravy. I think they need to rotate a little bit more. That's obviously part of the reason that Josh Sweat's production fell off. But I think that what they're really betting on here is the Jalen Carter ascension.
Interesting.
And
the interior rush.
And if Jalen Carter can be one of the 3 best pass rushing defensive tackles in the league, then all of a sudden everything becomes easier for the guys on the outside. You think about the 2017 Eagles, right? You had Fletcher Cox dominating inside, and you didn't have, a dominant edge rusher. You had the rotating guys, and any one of them can get to the quarterback at any point. I think if Jalen Carter is who they think he can be, then they're fine on the edge. And we'll get to like the draft expectations for edge rusher. Do they need to draft an edge rusher? To me, this is like, if Jalen Carter is the guy, is the dude on that defense, then we're fine. We don't need Haason Reddick.
Yeah, I disagree with you there, because I look at the interior rush and the edge rushing as kind of different arguments. They do need Jalen Carter to make that ascension, but I mean, the Vic Fangio defense that's kind of pointed to as like those. So let's take the 49ers defense when he was there, right? You had Justin Smith wrecking havoc on the inside, right? But you also had Alton Smith like being a difference maker on the edge. And I think that's you need those two things in conjunction. The Jalen Carter thing, I agree with
I'm
you
not saying
there.
you don't need edge rushers.
No, but I'm saying like you need for this defense to be what it's going to be. You need a top 10, top 15 edge rusher, right? And that 2017 defense, they did not have that. I mean, Brandon Graham was good. Vinny Curry was solid. Chris Long was productive, right? Derek Barnett was productive, but they didn't have that guy who you say, all right, this guy's top 15 in the league. And the Eagles need, look, Bryce Huff's being paid to be a top 20 edge rusher. Bryce Huff needs, as I said, he was a 10-sack guy last year, 40% of the snaps. They need Bryce Huff to be 13 to 15 sacks this year, right? And this, by the way, goes like, I keep pointing this out. I'm a big, like, sacks aren't overrated guy. You know, some defensive ends will disagree, and they're far more educated at this than I am. But from 2014, when Connor Barwin had, 14 and a half sacks, to 2022, when Haason Reddick had, and Josh Sweat and Brendan Graham, like they all feasted. The Eagles did not have a single edge rusher reach double-digit sacks, which this is not a position where they've had that high-level production in terms of sacks. Haason Reddick gave you that.
That's why they weren't paying a guy.
Yeah,
They didn't have that guy.
True. Haason Reddick can be that, or Haason Reddick was that type of player. He changed the defense. So they really need Bryce Huff and/or Josh Sweat and/or Nolan Smith to be that type of player. Nolan Smith is the wild card.
But that's what I'm saying is that if Jalen Carter is as good as they think he can be, it becomes easier for those guys.
Sure.
Their job becomes easier. And then, like, if Bryce Huff is not getting the attention, like the double team attention of opposing offenses, then he can get to 13, 15 sacks. But if he is all of a sudden the focal point and Jalen Carter is just kind of a guy, then it's going to be hard for, I think, those guys to make headway.
So you're saying the key here is Jalen Carter being...
I think so.
Okay.
We all silly like the mayor.